And then, Mike, what happened after the match?
Well, after the match, when Yoshida said we'd help y'all out, that really pissed off Z-Brats, and they all six of them started dismantling everyone, leaving, and it was all throughout ringside. They were going throughout the building. They were tearing them apart, case, and leaving BB Hulk in the ring with Yamato, rearing back for a wide open first flash. Yamato was dead out. It was going to be ugly. When a music was played that was not heard in this building, at the very least, for well over 4 years, as Shingo Takagi makes his return to Dragongate for the first time since October of 2018. He comes to the ring. He gives a status update, case. For everyone who has not kept up with Shingo Takagi, he is now 40 years old. He's still single. He is doing some YouTubing right now. His Christmas plans are up in the air. They were open yesterday, and he's still wrestling with the other place with a lion logo, and he wants to fight at the final gate. BB Hulk basically acted like that Shingo was a ghost the entire time, just freaking out there. And this gave the right moment for who else but Punch Tominaga to come out. Punch Tominaga, of course, for new fans, was Shingo's minion slash young boy, like to an extent, like way after any sort of young boy stage. Like 2015 was still being treated like this. He basically gets the crap kicked out by Shingo Takagi at will. He wanted to get a fight. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity, but instead he got lariated. Yamato, I cannot make out why it is Hulk and Shingo here, but I guess Shingo wanted to face Yamato. Yamato wanted a new generation partner, and it was Madoka Kakuda who came out to team with Yamato at Final Gate. It will be Yamato and Kakuda versus BB Hulk and his eternal rival, his class of 2004 compatriot, Shingo Takagi, in a Dragon Gate ring for the first time in 4 years.
A million things I want to talk about here. One, the angle being that Shingo lives the bachelor lifestyle and thus has nothing going on Christmas is the greatest gift imaginable. The fact that that is basically the purpose for him showing up here is so good. Just tremendous stuff all around. Jay and Ho-Ho do a great job of transcribing this promo, translating it for us. A home run angle, even if Hulk and Shingo teaming together isn't super clear, I felt that they got the point across that Shingo wanted to come back and wrestle Yamato specifically, and so they made this happen.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably that's the only way you can have Hulk team with Shingo, unless it's a retirement match, in this company. Like, you just can't do that. And the crowd exploded. The crowd went insane. And I think it's worth noting that they play the Dragon Gate theme to start off with, which is the safe move with this fan base, and then ended it with the New Japan theme, which I was like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's cool, I did this. There is a better than 0% chance that a lot of these fans don't watch New Japan whatsoever, or would have responded to if that music was playing.
Yeah, it was great stuff on that end. Let's talk about Kakuta for just a second, if you don't mind. I thought Alan Forel, friend of the show, who normally I steal his talking points because he says things so well, thought he said something very interesting in the Voices of Wrestling Discord. I just want to read his post verbatim, in which he says, and I quote, "I was so disappointed by how meek and low-key Kakuta was when he came to the ring to add himself to the match. It was the perfect representation of things Joe Lanza has been saying for a few years about the new generation of Japanese wrestlers generally not having as much fire in their belly, or at least they don't show it, as the generations before them. 23-year-old Shingo Takagi would have grabbed the guy by the throat and got right in his face. 24-year-old Shibata was throwing chairs at fuckers and kicking off riots. 25-year-old Kobashi was balling up his fist and staring down the barrel of Stan Hansen and Steve Williams. I'm begging guys to show that nowadays," end quote. What are your thoughts here on Kakuta's performance in relation to what Alan just said?
Well, they picked the one guy out of the new generation that I would have put money on wilting like this. I mean, Kakuda, like we've talked about for months, like when he came back, it was something that he disappeared. He would disappear in matches of which he was the only other tag team partner. You would forget that he was on the apron. It's something with him that, of course, he's not going to get into Shingo's face like he should. Like, Alan's right, but they kind of set themselves up for this to happen, I feel like.
It's interesting because I had really never even considered Alan's perspective until I read his post, because in my mind I was like, yeah, it's Kakuta. He's a low key guy. I kind of ran through the roster here of, okay, what young guy comes out, who's going to get in Shingo's face? I think SB Kento would do that. I think Hyo would do that. I think Shun would do that. I feel like Ishin probably has that in him. Mochizuki Jr. obviously has that in him. But like you said, Kakuta is just not that guy. And I didn't look at it as much as him wiltering or being nervous as much as it was just his general energy. So I didn't look at it as a knock at first. But now that I read that, I do think there was a great missed opportunity there. Look, the match is going to be hot. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to bring people to the building. I think it could have brought more people to the building had Kakuda really knocked it out of the park here. And for as good as he's been in the ring, he did not knock it out of the park in this segment.
Yeah, I don't know who is flying from Tokyo to Fukuoka for that match specifically, unless you know, there might be someone who's like, I'm not going to Dragongate show unless I get to see the Big Six, and here's the best we're going to be able to ever see again of it. So there's that, but it is something that you want to have, like, that clip, right? Like, this would have been the thing that would have gone into his B-roll for the rest of his career. Like, and you know how Dragongate likes doing that B-roll heavy clips of someone before a big match, and a missed moment, I feel like, is the right way to phrase it.
Yeah, I that was not my initial takeaway, but I do think that's where I am now. Now, I don't want to get too far off track, but in the Voices of Wrestling Discord, there's been a lot of discourse lately about, again, Japanese wrestlers maybe not having as much fire as normal, and also this long-term concern that crowds are just never going to come back to what they once were, and we have this generation of fans that don't know how to cheer. And I would like your thoughts on that in terms of where you stand long-term with, let's say, the culture of Japanese wrestling.
Well, yeah, okay. So crowds coming back, there I feel like that a lot of people have an unrealistic memory of what wrestling was like in 2019 and early 2020 in Japan, like business wise.
Hold on. I'm sorry. I've never heard anybody say that. That's a great point. Go ahead.
Yeah, because it was not like everyone was doing world beaters. That's objectively not true. You look at the numbers, and Noah was at a place where they had to get bought out by Cyberfight to stay in probably stay in business. Russell One was already going to die in 2020. It didn't matter that COVID happened with it. There were other companies that would be considered major companies that really should not be considered major companies, if not for their abhorrent drawing, but because of the fact that they had to have fans fund a bus repair. It's something that I like. The industry, in a lot of ways, like a good thing happened in COVID, which was that Stardom seems to be taking off under Bushiroad ownership. That helps out part of the industry, but you still look at the men's side, and you have New Japan that I don't need to get into where do you see New Japan in 10 years? Look at that roster. We don't need to do that here. But you have New Japan so much higher off from everyone else. And I think that people either thought that there was a trickle down that just did not exist in Japanese wrestling. Like when has really something from pro wrestling trickled down to other promotions in Japan? Not in modern history. So it's not like New Japan being able to do well was helping out DDT,
No, because I think, just in case there's a rebuttal there, I'm with you. I don't think the success of 90s New Japan or 90s All Japan also made Michinoku Pro successful. To my knowledge, there's no data of that happening.
Right. So the industry was in a reality that was not what at least international fans probably were thinking. Like, I feel like it was pretty night and day. And I think that only now people are realizing, like, wow, that's 3 years of that does numbers on every promotion's business in Japan. Like, I think people are finally kind of realizing the situations there. So fans coming back, that was, what's to say, like some scandal, which has happened a lot in Japanese sports history. Who's to say a scandal brings down, or like that Bushi Road has to divest itself from New Japan? That's going to like trickle down happens in the regard there that bad press trickles down throughout the industry. So like it was always in a precarious spot. It's just that people weren't paying attention.
We've had one big Dragon Gate show with cheering, Gate of Destiny in Osaka. They're at a point, DDT just ran a cheering Cork and Hall show and they filled the place with 700 fans, but we see Dragon Gate drawing almost twice that number. It doesn't make any fiscal sense for them to run cheering Cork and Hall shows. And, who knows as an industry when we're going to get back to that air quotes normal. But of the big shows that have happened with cheering fans, the general consensus seems to be, oh, well, these fans aren't as lively as I thought they were going to be. And at risk of becoming a white guy explaining Japanese culture to people, I certainly don't want to do that. I'm merely going by what people that live there have told me. And part of it was Jay on this podcast in July talking about, you and I might love when Takuma Fujiwara does something so insane that the crowd audibly gasps for it, or when the Golden Rose is picked up by Yuki Yoshioka and the crowd pops huge for it like they would in 2014 or 2015. You and I might love that, but ultimately there's a cultural difference there where the people that lost self-control and the people that made those noises are being frowned upon by most of the people in that culture. And that appears to be the case even 3 years into the pandemic, as frustrating as that is. So my read on the crowds, for the first Dragon Gate show and for the first EDT show and for the few Noah shows that have had cheering shows, and I bet it'll be this way for the big Dragon Gate show, or I'm sorry, the big New Japan show in February. It's a shame they're not doing the Dome with a vocal audience, but the first big New Beginning show in February for New Japan with a cheering crowd, I don't expect that to be this raucous, red hot crowd, because I think there's a cultural difference where people don't want to jump in too quickly. But I do think the notion that fans have forgotten how to cheer, or that hot crowds in Japanese wrestling will never exist again, or that even a generation of fans that grew up with cheering and no longer want to go to shows because they can't cheer, I am yet to believe any of that's true. I think, God, we're 3 years into it. Japan is moving at a glacial pace. I mean, you and I are on record for the first 2 years of the pandemic being about as cautious as anybody could be in the States with COVID. And I think you and I are both at a point where, we're looking at Japan and going, all right, speed it up a little bit. We can ease these restrictions more and more and more.
Yeah.
I just think there's a cultural difference where people are not understanding that there's no need to jump in head first, or at least that's the way that these crowds feel.
Yeah. So, movement wise, Obari, the president of New Japan, yesterday, it was at a governmental meeting. I know that the native account tweeted about it, but it was him, heads of cyber fight, and Ryzen and One MMA lobbying the government. I don't know if this was Hase's committee, because Hiroshi Hase was like leading up it as a part of his like governmental, like he is a important man in Japanese politics, Hiroshi Hase. But I don't know if it was him, but they were basically saying, listen, look at this here. Why are we being left behind? Because Japanese like baseball, soccer, they're back to cheering crowds like they have, but wrestling, because where it was positioned with performing arts. So it's like, oh, you can't really go cheer at a theater performance, so why you're being treated as this, you can't do that there. They're trying to break that up there. The whole fans not cheering, forgetting how to cheer, I think that's a little bit sky's falling. Give it 6 months and give it consistency. It's not like every Tokyo show for all these promotions or every single stop is cheering fans here. It's here and there. It's here and there. And I think that when it's like consistently back to voices okay, give it a couple months, But
Yeah,
like,
I think you're exactly right. Consistency is the key there, and there's been no consistency. I mean, even within promotions, it's some DDT shows are going to be cheering, some aren't, and that's got to be a headache. It's tough for fans. It's not easy for them to cheer, and even if I have my reservations long term about talent in Japan outside of Dragon Gate, because look, there's nothing in Big Japan. I am low on all Japan, comparatively speaking. I've yet to see evidence that Noah can produce a quality dojo graduate. Even if I really like Inamura, I don't trust what they're going to do with him. And, credit to New Japan for really putting the pieces in place for a rebuild. We'll see how well it goes. But again, for male Japanese wrestling outside of Dragon Gate, I am a little bit concerned for the future, but I'm not concerned for the culture that surrounds it.
yeah, I mean, New Japan did the right thing 5 years too late, I think. But it is something where there is like, should I go really bummer here for a second, case?
I would love for you to.
That there's an honest thing that there's an honest shot that they're within 25 to 30 years, things break the wrong way, that pro wrestling isn't like a cultural force in Japan anymore. So like there is a lot of evidence that it could be something with the aging population, the massive decrease in popularity and interest towards other pop culture things. But like there's no argument to be made that maybe it is something that things go south, economy tanks. It could be even more dire, I think.
Well, COVID's not helping. I mean,
No.
eh, you know, New Japan is keeping their head above water, but they're suffering. Stardom is growing, but I still think the growth of Stardom is overrated.
And it's hard to judge. Like people like again, like not to completely go on this point again, but it's something that context is very divorced from a lot of Stardom arguments about its position. Like what there's still no clarification on how they do their attendance. Like Dragon Gate, they comps aren't in attendance. I know that for some big shows with the conglomerate promotions, they're still adding in those comp tickets as attendance.
Yes,
So there's a lot of questions.
if you've seen any big All Japan show in recent years, yes. But I mean, look, think about it from this perspective, and it's why. Again, maybe it's just a personal thing where 2020 and 2021, I was, very much pandemic minded and being as cautious as I can. And look, I've gone out, I've done everything that people have asked me to do, and I've gone out and lived my life this year because of its risk assessment. And so I think in 2023, I'm going to lose a little bit more patience with Japan, just waiting for things to speed up and to be free because of my own personal standing. But think about it from this perspective: we're celebrating 1,200 fans at Cork and Hall for Dragon Gate, which is the best number they've done. Again, other than a retirement show in 2 full years, almost 3 full
retirement
years,
and Toryumon, but you shouldn't judge those two.
That's right. Two gimmick shows essentially. But if they put 1,200 fans in Cork and Hall at any other time in their career, we would have to do an emergency podcast about how the sky is falling, and we're celebrating this 1,200, and most promotions are not hitting that 1,200. I mean, it's what?
Yeah.
It's the 2 Stardom shows did 1,500. There's the Kinesh show and the Toryumon show, and what was the freelance show? Was it a Ricky Dozan show or something?
There was one that was the 50th anniversary of Cork and Hall.
Okay, that's what it was. I couldn't remember what they were celebrating, but that show did 1,500 as well.
There was a Ricky Dozan one that did that well too.
Okay, yeah. So there was basically a handful of freelance shows, 2 Stardom shows, and 2 or 3 Dragon Gate shows are the numbers that we're celebrating. And under normal rules, 1,500 and Corkin is good, but it's not great. It's not anything we're celebrating. And so you factor that in by 3 years. You think about promotions that aren't doing as well as Dragon Gate, and then you think about all of the other markets that are still down. And look, it's a bloodbath. I mean, I'm amazed that more promotions haven't gone by the wayside. I do think, maybe it's the foolish optimist in me, I do think eventually this stuff will subside and we'll see the industry slowly, and I mean slowly, start to crawl back to a healthier state. But in terms of the culture, again, I don't have long-term reservations about that.
Yeah, and one last note that's worth noting when we talk about this sort of thing. For basically up until the Stronghearts departure, Dragon Gate had the longest continuous streak of Korakuen sellouts.
It was
Not
I tabulated it a while ago. I believe it was summer of 2012 through 2018. It was about a 6-year streak.
so that would have been approximately 75 shows at the very least.
Yeah.
So it's something that when you celebrate things, as I like to say, we like to put things in context here. Any more Shingo thoughts? We kind of really diverged there for a second. He it's something that I did not see this day really happening anytime soon, but especially less than a decade after leaving the promotion and coming back, it's insane. And maybe that's something that when we talk about the overall state of the industry, the fact that Shingo is working a Dragon Gate show might also be another kind of tell of the health of the industry.
Can I play my favorite game and go through Cage Match real quick and just remind people, especially those that may not be super high on 2022 Dragon Gate, what the card for Shingo's final Dragon Gate show looked like?
Oh, please do. It's wild.
Yeah, so this show was on the Dragon Gate Network. You can watch it if you do so, please. It's Hakata Star Lanes, October 7th of 2018, opening with KZ, Susumu Yokosuka, and Brother Yashi against Hyo Watanabe, Kota Minoura, and Problem Dragon. I'll read this whole card, Mike, and then I'll get your thoughts at the end. Match number 2 was the Bicycle Brothers, Don Fuji and Ryo Saito versus Gamma and Sashi Hokoboy. That match went 7 minutes. Match number 3 was Kagatora versus Punch Tamanaga, which was an 8-minute no contest. And then after that, UT, Yamato, and Yosuke Santa Maria versus Masaki Mochizuki, Shun Skywalker, and Yuki Yoshioka. Funny how the more things change, the more they stay the same. Semi-main event, Ben-K, Big R Shimizu, Pac, Takashi Yoshida, and Yasushi Kanda versus Dragon Kid, Jason Lee, Kaito Ishida, Masato Yoshino, and Naruki Doi. And then BB Hulk versus Shingo was obviously the main event there.
I noticed that Case made sure to tell you the length of the Bicycle Brothers match.
And the Kagatora versus Punch Tamanaga no contest, which ended after 8 minutes.
God, they were so lucky that things worked out the right way with Pac.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, the savior. I mean, look, we celebrate RED now, but RED went through so many iterations, and the world was not pro RED until Pac came in, and then even then, it seemed like the unit took a minute to find its place. But I said at the time, and I still think this years later, I mean, Pac saved Eita's ass, because without him, Eita's leading this heel unit that is directionless, and I don't think he was equipped to do it at the time, quite frankly. But outside of that Tribe Vanguard versus Mochizuki Dojo match, which looks outstanding, and I might go rewatch that, UT Yamato and Yosuke versus Mochi, Shun, and Yoshioka. And then I guess if you want to watch that 10-man tag, I mean, yes, it was Ben-K, Shimizu, and Pac, but it was also Yoshida and Kanda versus Maximum. You see the problems on the undercard. Again, Don Fuji and Ryo Saito versus Gamma and Sashi Hokoboy, and that got time. An opening match with Problem Dragon and with Brother Yashi, and that got time. A 8-minute Kagatora versus Punch Tamanaga no contest match. 2018, the highs are high, but those lows are very, very low.